The year was 1943, and the world was already deep in flames, consumed by the largest war humanity had ever seen. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, millions of soldiers clashed in relentless combat. Yet among them were not only men. For the first time in modern warfare, thousands of women stepped into military roles, putting on uniforms and entering a battlefield that had never truly been meant for them. American women joined the Women's Army Corps, flying aircraft and working in critical operations just behind the front lines. British women took to the skies as pilots, ferrying planes from factories to airfields through dangerous, uncertain conditions. In occupied territories, French women became part of resistance networks, sabotaging German supply lines and carrying secret messages under constant threat of death. They all believed they were bound by the same rules of war as their male counterparts. But that belief would soon be shattered. Lieutenant Mary Collins had never imagined herself as a prisoner. Serving with the American Women's Army Corps in Italy, she managed radio communications only miles from the advancing front. When German tanks suddenly broke through near Monte Cassino, chaos erupted. Orders were shouted, papers abandoned, and panic spread through the small headquarters. "Run!" her commander yelled as enemy forces closed in. But there was nowhere to escape. Within moments, Mary and 4 other officers were surrounded. The German captain who received them appeared more curious than angry. He spoke flawless English, studying them carefully, almost as if they were something unfamiliar. "How interesting," he remarked. "America sends its daughters to die in foreign mud." There was something unsettling in his gaze, something that went beyond the authority of a captor. Mary felt it immediately. "We are military personnel," she said firmly, pointing to her lieutenant insignia. "Under the Geneva Convention, we have rights as prisoners of war." The captain's smile was slow and cold. "The Geneva Convention protects soldiers," he replied, "not women playing at war." He turned to his men and spoke in German. Mary didn't understand the words, but she saw the shift in their expressions, the way their eyes changed as they looked at her and the others. Later, she would remember that exact moment as the first time she truly felt fear. That same day, hundreds of miles away in France, British pilot Sarah Bennett was crawling out of the wreckage of her Spitfire. Shot down by anti-aircraft fire near Paris, she had survived the crash, only to be captured hours later while hiding in a barn. Trained for this possibility, she gave only her name, rank, and serial number, just as protocol required. She wore her Royal Air Force uniform. She had identification. The rules were clear. But the German officer interrogating her saw things differently. "An English rose flying killing machines," he said, with quiet disdain. "How far your country has fallen." After writing something in his notebook, he looked up again. "You will not be going to a regular prisoner camp. Your situation requires special handling." Across German-occupied Europe, this scene repeated itself again and again. American, British, and French women were captured, and each time the same pattern emerged. They were separated immediately from male prisoners, classified differently, and processed through systems that did not officially exist. Documents discovered after the war would later reveal that this treatment had been planned long before these women were ever captured. A memo from June 1943 described female enemy combatants as a unique category, stating they were not to be processed through standard prisoner of war channels. Another document, kept secret until decades later, labeled them as morally compromised, claiming they had abandoned their natural roles and therefore forfeited traditional protections. By late 1943, the Germans had built an entire hidden system for handling captured women. There were no Red Cross inspections, no exchanges, and no oversight. While male prisoners were sent to established camps, women were transported elsewhere, into a network of unmarked facilities designed specifically for them. Mary would later recall the moment she realized something was terribly wrong. "They put us in a separate truck," she testified years later. "The male prisoners were taken one way. We were driven in another direction. I heard one guard say, 'These ones go to the special facility.' The way he smiled. I knew then this would be worse than anything we had trained for. What most of these women didn't know was that their fate had already been decided long before their capture." In 1942, a meeting at SS headquarters had brought together officials from intelligence, medicine, and psychology. There, they developed what they called Protocol 27, a set of procedures specifically designed for female prisoners. The documents described these women not just as enemies, but as anomalies, something to be studied, analyzed, and broken. The transport carrying Mary and the others moved through the night, heading deeper into German-controlled territory. By dawn, they arrived at a facility with no markings, no flags, and no presence on any official map. When the doors opened, a German officer greeted them in perfect English. "Welcome to your new home, ladies," he said calmly. "Your war is over, but your real troubles are just beginning." What followed was not what they had been trained for. The first thing taken from them was not information or weapons, but dignity. At the facility, the women were separated immediately and brought into stark, brightly lit rooms. Orders were given sharply. "Strip everything off," the command came from a German woman in uniform, someone clearly trained for this role. Guards, both men and women, stood watching. The cold air, the harsh lights, the silence, it all felt calculated. Mary tried again. "We are military personnel under the Geneva Convention." The officer cut her off with a laugh. "That agreement is for soldiers. You are women who have forgotten your place." She signaled the guards. "You will comply." What the Germans called an examination was not medical in any meaningful sense. It was systematic humiliation. The women were forced to stand exposed under bright lights while officers observed them, commented, took notes, and photographed them repeatedly. Officially, it was for identification. In reality, many of these photographs would later be found not in military files, but in private collections, kept as trophies. Sarah Bennett would later write in a hidden diary that the most disturbing part was how structured it all was. This was not random cruelty. It was organized, deliberate, and methodical. There were forms, procedures, designated rooms, everything designed specifically for women prisoners. The process continued for hours. Measurements were taken. Personal questions were asked. Doctors conducted invasive examinations that served no real purpose beyond asserting control. All of it was recorded in files labeled under Female Prisoner Processing Protocols. German records later revealed the intent behind these actions. The goal was psychological. By stripping these women of identity, privacy, and dignity, the system aimed to dismantle their sense of themselves as soldiers. They were to be reminded, constantly and brutally, that they were vulnerable in ways male prisoners were not. For French resistance fighters, the situation was even harsher. Without formal military status, they were labeled simply as criminals. Many were subjected to public humiliation, displayed before troops as examples, their punishment framed as a consequence of defying traditional roles. After processing, the differences continued. While male prisoners received standard uniforms, the women were given ill-fitting civilian clothing, often inadequate for the cold. Complaints were met with mockery. That first night, temperatures dropped close to freezing. The women huddled together for warmth, strangers forming bonds through shared suffering. Across at least 15 known facilities, this system repeated itself. Training manuals instructed guards to exploit psychological pressure, forcing women into impossible choices between dignity and survival. Everything was documented, studied, and refined. Yet despite everything, something unexpected happened. The women resisted. In small, quiet ways, they held on to who they were. They formed tight connections, shared whispered conversations, and reminded each other of their ranks and units. "We are still soldiers," Sarah wrote. "This is just another battlefield." This quiet defiance frustrated their captors. The system had been designed to break them, but many refused to collapse completely. Even as conditions worsened, even as new phases of interrogation loomed ahead, that resistance remained. And as the first week of captivity came to an end, Mary overheard a guard say something that confirmed her worst fears. If they still believed themselves to be soldiers, he said, then it was time for the next phase. What they had endured so far had only been the beginning.